What if everything you ever wanted was just one trade away? Wealth, power, revenge, a second chance. The universe doesn't give freely, but there are others who will. All you have to do is sign. But remember, the price is never what you expect.
Ink and Blood, The Cost of Greed. Chapter 1. The Crimson Lantern Pawnshop. The alley was barely wide enough for a single cart to pass through. Hidden between large businesses for the rich and influential, it smelled of rain-soaked stone and the faintest trace of incense. Few dared to walk this path. Those who did often weren't looking for it, and yet somehow they always found it. At the end of the alley stood an ancient wooden shop, its curved jade-green roof standing in defiant contrast to the sleek modern skyline. Above the door, a faded sign swayed gently in the night breeze. The Crimson Lantern Pawnshop. The red lanterns that lined its entrance flickered unnaturally, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the cobbled street. Their glow did not wane with the wind. Inside, the shop smelled of burning incense and aged parchment. Dark wooden shelves lined the walls, overflowing with strange artifacts, jade talismans, ornate daggers, golden ingots, ancient scrolls sealed with wax. In the center of the room, behind an intricately carved wooden counter, stood a man who did not belong in such an ancient setting. He looked young, too young to be the shop's owner. His long black hair was tied neatly into a ponytail, and his slender frame was wrapped in a traditional black changshan, its fabric crisp and spotless. What stood out most, however, were his round sunglasses, perched casually on the bridge of his nose. There was no sunlight in the shop, yet he wore them anyway. "Come in." The voice was smooth as velvet, as if the man had been expecting him all along. Lin Wei hesitated at the threshold. Something about this place felt wrong. The air was too thick. The silence was too deep. The lanterns outside swayed, but inside the air did not move. And yet the promise of wealth was too tempting to ignore. Lin Wei stepped forward. The door closed behind him. The man behind the counter smiled. "You've come to make a trade, haven't you?" Chapter 2. The Second Trade. The Past for Gold. Lin Wei had expected dust and decay, the kind of pawn shop where desperate men traded their last possessions for scraps of silver. This was not that kind of place. The Crimson Lantern Pawnshop was filled with treasures that had no place in a rundown alley. The shelves groaned under the weight of jade ornaments, silver combs inlaid with pearls, lacquered scroll cases sealed in wax, and golden statues of forgotten gods. It smelled of burning incense, aged parchment, and something else, something ancient, something waiting. Lin Wei swallowed hard. "Who are you?" he asked. The man in the black changshan smirked, adjusting his sleeves. "Call me Mr. Zhao." His voice was smooth, rich, like the last note of a song that lingered just a little. Too long in the air, Lin Wei hesitated. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be here, but then he remembered his debts. The collectors had come knocking again. If he didn't pay soon, there wouldn't be a next time. He needed money. Now. "Can you help me or not?" he asked, trying to sound confident. Mr. Zhao chuckled. "Of course, but first tell me..." He leaned forward slightly, his sunglasses reflecting the flickering lanterns. "What is it that you desire?" Lin Wei barely had to think. "Wealth. I want to be rich." Mr. Zhao tilted his head. "Ah, a classic request." He laced his fingers together. "But tell me, my friend, why do you need it?" Lin Wei hesitated. I have debts and dreams. I want a better life." Mr. Zhao waved a dismissive hand. "A better life? Wealth is never about having, Lin Wei. It's about getting more. That is why no rich man is ever satisfied." Lin Wei frowned. "I don't have anything valuable." Mr. Zhao chuckled. "Oh, but you do. Everyone does. It's just a matter of recognizing what you can live without." He pulled out a thin red scroll, its edges shimmering faintly under the lantern light. "Tell me, Lin Wei, what don't you need?" At first it seemed harmless. Lin Wei traded away his sense of direction, an odd request, but a small sacrifice for a pouch of silver coins, heavier than he expected. As he weighed the money in his hands, relief surged through him. He could finally pay off his debts. Mr. Zhao leaned casually against the counter, adjusting the cuffs of his changshan. "So, tell me, Lin Wei, was it worth it?" Lin Wei hesitated. He felt no different. The loss seemed insignificant. "I suppose," so Mr. Zhao nodded approvingly. "A wise choice. After all, in the grand scheme of things, how often does a man truly need to know where he is going? As long as there's money in his pocket, someone else can always lead the way." The words made sense. Lin Wei smirked, and now that he had tasted wealth, he wanted more. A few weeks later, Lin Wei returned. The silver had run dry too quickly. There were too many things to buy, too many pleasures to indulge in. The moment he stepped into the pawn shop, Mr. Zhao was already waiting, as if he had never left. "Ah, back so soon?" he mused. "I take it the silver was not enough." Lin Wei clenched his jaw. "I need more." Mr. Zhao exhaled through his nose, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. "Of course you do." He pulled out another red scroll, this one slightly longer than the last. "Tell me, what else do you not need?" Lin Wei thought for a moment. His mind raced through the possibilities. Then it came to him. "My childhood memories." Mr. Zhao arched a brow. "Oh, now that is an interesting choice." He leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled. "Most people are sentimental about their past. Tell me, why do you believe you can do without yours?" Lin Wei shrugged. "They don't serve me. I barely remember them anyway." Mr. Zhao's smirk widened, his teeth just a little too perfect. "An excellent rationale. The past is nothing but a burden, really. The future, now that is where wealth and power lie." He slid the contract toward Lin Wei. Lin Wei signed without hesitation. This time the payment was more than silver. It was a bag full of gleaming gold ingots. Lin Wei left the pawn shop wealthier than he had ever been. But something felt off. As he walked home through the crowded streets, a vendor called out to him, selling candied plums. Lin Wei paused. Something about the sight of them stirred. Something. But when he tried to recall the memory, there was nothing, only a blank void. Chapter 3. The Greed That Never Ends. Lin Wei had everything he ever wanted. Wealth, status, power. He lived in a grand estate, wore the finest silk robes, and drank with officials and merchants who once wouldn't have given him a passing glance. His name carried weight. His purse never emptied. And yet, something was missing. It wasn't the memories of childhood. Those were gone, and he didn't care to chase them. It wasn't his sense of direction either. His servants guided him where he needed to go, and he had learned to give orders instead of walking alone. No, this was different. It was as if a hollow space had carved itself inside his chest, growing wider with each passing day. Lin Wei didn't know what he lacked, only that it needed to be filled, and he knew exactly where to go. The third trade, the loss of taste. By now, the Crimson Lantern Pawnshop felt almost familiar. The red lanterns still flickered strangely, their glow refusing to bend to the wind. The scent of incense and parchment curled through the air, clinging to Lin Wei's clothes the moment he stepped inside. And as always, Mr. Zhao was waiting, seated lazily on the counter. He toyed with a thin calligraphy brush, twirling it between his fingers. His long ponytail draped neatly over his shoulder, and his dark sunglasses gleamed in the lantern light. At Lin Wei's approach, he didn't bother looking up. "Ah, Lin Wei." His tone was as smooth as ever. "Tell me, what are we trading today?" Lin Wei didn't hesitate. "I need more." Only then did Mr. Zhao glance up, a smirk playing on his lips. "More? What?" Lin Wei clenched his fists. "More gold, more power." Mr. Zhao chuckled, setting the brush aside. Naturally, he stood, stepping closer. "Tell me, Lin Wei, did the loss of your childhood memories trouble you?" Lin Wei frowned. "No." "Good, good." Mr. Zhao's smile widened. You, see, most men are sentimental, but you have a sharp mind, a practical one. You understand that sacrifices must be made. Lin Wei felt a flicker of pride. He liked the way Zhao spoke to him, not as a desperate, foolish man, but as someone destined for greatness. Mr. Zhao spread out a new contract, the red ink gleaming under the lantern light. Now, what else can we part with? Lin Wei exhaled, considering his options. Then he nodded. My sense of taste. A pause. Mr. Zhao raised a brow, clearly amused. Oh, and why that? Lin Wei smirked. Because I've already tasted everything there is to taste. Wine, roasted, duck, bird's nest soup, the finest teas. It no longer excites me. Mr. Zhao let out a low whistle. My, how quickly we become disillusioned. He slid the contract forward, his voice laced with amusement. Very well, sign here. Lin Wei did, and in return, Mr. Zhao handed him a chest filled with shimmering gold coins. Lin Wei left the shop with a triumphant grin. That night, Lin Wei feasted. His guests, merchants, noblemen, even minor officials, sat around the great dining table, laughing and drinking, their cups overflowing with expensive wine. The most skilled chefs in the city had prepared a grand feast. Braised pork glazed in honey, delicate dumplings filled with the rarest mushrooms, freshly steamed fish drizzled with fragrant sauces. Lin Wei raised his cup, tilting it to his lips. Nothing. No warmth from the wine. No sweetness. No bitterness. Just emptiness. He frowned. He reached for a dumpling, biting down. Nothing. His tongue registered texture but not flavor. For the first time, unease settled in his stomach. A concubine leaned close, placing a delicate hand on his arm. My lord, is something wrong? Lin Wei forced a smile. No, I am simply not hungry. Days turned into weeks, and though his gold had never been greater, his hunger never ceased. Not a hunger for food, that was gone. No, this was something else, a deeper emptiness. He thought at first that it was simply a need for more wealth, but even as he spent more, gained more, commanded more, it wasn't enough. Lin Wei could no longer remember the joys of childhood. He could no longer enjoy the taste of fine food. He could no longer feel the satisfaction he once had. And yet he still wanted more. And so he returned to the Crimson Lantern Pawnshop once again. Chapter 4. The Fourth Trade. A Dangerous Proposition. The weight of gold no longer comforted Lin Wei. It filled his coffers, his vaults, his silken sleeves, yet it could not fill the hollow space inside his chest. He had long since forgotten his childhood. He could no longer savor the taste of wine or delicacies. He could barely remember a time when he wasn't trying to gain more. But still, he felt unsatisfied. And so, as he had done before, he returned to the Crimson Lantern Pawnshop. Red lanterns still burned unnaturally, their glow defying the wind. The scent of incense and aged paper greeted him like an old friend or a patient predator. Inside, Mr. Zhao was waiting. He had not aged a day. Not a single hair in his long ponytail had shifted. His sunglasses still gleamed beneath the lantern. Light, though there was no sun in sight. The moment Lin Wei stepped forward, Mr. Zhao smirked. You've come again. It wasn't a question. Lin Wei strode forward, his voice steady. I need more. Mr. Zhao exhaled, amused. He tapped a sealed scroll against his palm, considering him. Do you? Lin Wei frowned. You know I do. Of course. Mr. Zhao set the scroll on the counter. But tell me, Lin Wei, what else do you have to offer? For the first time, Lin Wei hesitated. The easy trades, the things he thought he didn't need, were already gone. What else could he give up? His sight, his hearing, his voice. No, those were too valuable. Sensing his struggle, Mr. Zhao's smile deepened. Slowly, almost lazily, he unrolled a new contract. The parchment darker than the others before it. The ink shimmered crimson. Then, Perhaps, Mr. Zhao mused. It's time for a bigger trade. Lin Wei's breath caught. What do you mean? Mr. Zhao tilted his head. Your firstborn son. Lin Wei stared at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock on the shelf behind them. Then he scoffed. But I don't have a son. Mr. Zhao grinned, showing teeth. Not yet. A cold prickle ran down Lin Wei's spine. That's absurd. I can't trade something that doesn't exist. Mr. Zhao lifted a single finger. Oh, but you can. He gestured to the contract. A simple agreement. One that states, should you ever have a son, he will belong to me. Lin Wei's heart pounded. The idea felt distant, unreal. A child he didn't have, couldn't even picture. What was the loss of something that didn't yet exist? His hands trembled slightly as he considered it. Mr. Zhao's voice remained smooth, patient. You said you wanted more wealth, more power. And what is a child, really? He leaned forward slightly. Just another burden. Lin Wei's lips parted, then closed. He had always believed in practicality. Had he not already discarded his childhood, his senses, his past? Had those losses truly hurt him? No. Why should this be any different? And so with a steady hand, he signed the contract. Mr. Zhao smiled. A pleasure doing business with you. Lin Wei felt a wave of relief. The contract vanished into black smoke, and in its place, Mr. Zhao produced a sealed chest of gold. Lin Wei took it eagerly, feeling the weight of his fortune, the proof of his triumph. As he turned to leave, Mr. Zhao spoke one last time. Do enjoy the years ahead, Lin Wei. His voice was unreadable. They will pass quicker than you think. Lin Wei barely noticed. He had what he wanted, and for now that was enough. Final chapter. The debt comes due. The years passed quickly. Lin Wei's power grew. His gold multiplied. His name became legend. He had everything. A palace-like estate, an army of servants, the ear of the emperor himself. His influence stretched. Across cities, his wealth rivaled that of lords, and men feared to speak his name carelessly. For the first time in his life, he was untouchable. Then, his wife became pregnant. At first, Lin Wei felt nothing but satisfaction. A son was an extension of his legacy, a symbol of everything he had built. And yet, as the months passed, an unease settled in him. He convinced himself it was nothing, until the child was born. And the moment his son entered the world, a terrible wind howled through the mansion. Lin Wei stood frozen, his newborn son clutched in the midwife's arms. The baby was frail, his tiny fingers curled, his breath soft and delicate. Too delicate. Then, a knock echoed through the halls, soft, unhurried, expected. Lin Wei's blood ran cold. His heart pounded against his ribs, each beat bringing back a memory. A contract signed in ink the color of blood. Slowly, he turned toward the entrance of his chambers. The doors opened without a hand to push them. And there, standing in the golden glow of the lanterns, was a man dressed in black silk. His long ponytail swayed slightly. His sunglasses sat, as always, perched on the bridge of his nose. Your payment is due, he said in that same smooth, silken voice. Lin Wei's breath came in ragged gasps. Please, he begged. Not my son. Mr. Zhao chuckled softly, shaking his head. My dear Lin Wei, he was never yours to keep. Lin Wei fell to his knees, clutching the child to his chest. I'll trade anything, everything. Just let me keep him. Mr. Zhao tilted his head slightly as if contemplating the request. He sighed, feigning disappointment. Lin Wei, I must ask, why the sudden change of heart? You had no hesitation when you signed the contract. Lin Wei's face twisted in anguish. I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was giving. Zhao adjusted his sleeves, his voice smooth, almost sympathetic. Ah, you mean to say you didn't value what you were giving away at the time. He folded his hands behind his back. Tell me, Lin Wei, do you regret the wealth you have gained? The power, the luxury? Lin Wei did not answer. Zhao smirked. Of course not. And yet now that the cost is before you, you hesitate. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head as though disappointed. It is always the same. Lin Wei's grief twisted into anger. You tricked me. You're a devil feeding on the greed of desperate men. Zhao lifted a brow, his smile unwavering. A devil. He chuckled softly. No, my friend. I am merely a merchant. I conduct business. And business, as you well know, is built on agreements. His voice became silkier, as if explaining a simple truth to a stubborn child. I never forced your hand. I never deceived you. Every trade was made at your own will. Lin Wei clenched his fists. Zhao shrugged lightly. Would you call a butcher a murderer because he sells meat? Or a gambler a victim because he lost the bet he made? He spread his arms. You came to me. You asked for more, and I gave it to you. You have lived the life most men could only dream of. Why should I not ask for what is mine? Zhao's lips curled into a patient, knowing smile. Come now. You were always so eager to trade before. Let's see if you can afford your son.
Every deal has a price, and every story has an end. But don't worry, we'll meet again soon. After all, some pacts, they're never truly over.